So let me just say, first of all, welcome everybody. My name is Jan Feldman. I'm the Executive Director of Lawyers for the Creative Arts. And we are producing this 5-part film law series in partnership with the Chicago Film Office. And so I want to thank the Film Office for involving us in this. We've had, this is now our 5th in the series. And for some reason, I'm only seeing, well, I'm the least tech person in this entire room, so I'm just going to muddle through this. But we've had prior sessions on film acquisition and financing and distribution. And so this is the last of our series, so I welcome everybody. We've had great panelists and great programs in the past, and the same is true for today. So I want to just tell you a little bit about Lawyers for the Creative Arts and then get right into the program. Lawyers for the Creative Arts, for those who don't know, is a legal service agency that is entirely devoted to helping those in the arts. We've been around for 50 years, and we help people and individuals and organizations who have legal issues that they want to bring to us. And as you can tell from this program, we also do a large number of educational programs on all kinds of topics affecting the arts. Some are deep dives into legal and related business issues, such as this series. Others relate to some more general topics that affect many people in different kinds of organizations, such as employment and real estate. And so we're very broad educators of those in the arts on issues that affect their careers, is kind of the way I would put it. As I said, this prior programs have been on rights acquisition, fundraising, assembling the team, and distribution, and this one is on production. So our panelists today is really another blue ribbon panel. Kwame Amoku is the director of the Chicago Film Office. Christina Varatzis is the founder of Firefly Films, to say that 5 times in a row. Cat White with Cat Lee Productions. Charles Gardner is an actor and also the Chicago local president of SAG-AFTRA. And last but not least is Chris Johnson, not the Chris Johnson that you see with the plaid shirt, who's one of my colleagues at Lawyers for the Creative Arts, but the founder of Johnsonese Brokerage. So he's going to talk about insurance issues. And our panelists today, in addition to the ones I mentioned, is our moderator, who is Jerry Glover. Jerry's just waving. He's got the backlighting there, Jerry.
Can't do anything about it, Jan. Can't do anything about it.
No problem, Jerry. No problem. So Jerry was formerly a partner at the law firm of Levin, Strand & Glover. The last name partner there was actually him. He primarily represented producers of film, theater, and TV, with a part of the practice devoted to promotion and marketing. Before that, he was senior vice president and general counsel for WTTW, and head of the legal writing program at John Marshall Law School. And he was formerly board president of Lawyers for the Creative Arts. One of his last acts in that regard was an unfortunate one. He had actually hired me to be the new executive director. So we'll see how that turns out. But in Jerry's history, he's been named Chicago Entertainment Lawyer of the Year on multiple occasions. He represented Paramount Pictures, the Broadway production of Spider-Man, the Oprah Winfrey Show, and Ellen over the course of his career. So we are in good hands with Jerry as moderator of this program today. And with that, I want to turn it over to Jerry. Take it away.
Thanks, Jan. Appreciate it. And welcome to everyone. The one thing that Jan left out about me is that I'm always known as the entertainment lawyer with a face just made for radio. So sorry, folks. Sorry about all that. But we are going to talk about a lot of important things today that deal with production, whether it's pre-production, the actual filming, post-production matters, etc. We're going to talk about permits that may be required for your filming, logistical matters, timing of the way things are actually produced, dealing with the weather, which in Chicago is often a big deal, even dealing with neighbors in the area where you're filming. We may be talking about unexpected glitches, the role of the unions, of lawyers, insurance, and many other things that our panelists will raise on their own. So let's get started. And what I'd like to do
Jerry, I'm sorry, Jerry. Excuse me, I hate to interrupt you right as you start going. Oh, I forgot to mention just a couple of technicalities. And that is, we do have a chat line here, a chat function, and you're free to use that. If you have questions that you want to pose, this is for the audience here. If you have questions you want to pose, use the Q&A at the bottom of your screen. That will come to Chris Johnson, the guy with the plaid shirt, and myself. And we'll, as well as Jerry and others, will see it, and we may be able to take care of some of those questions during the program. If not, we have a Q&A session at the end. We expect this to run about an hour and a half, and we'll certainly leave time at the end for questions. So I'm sorry, Jerry, for the interruption, but back to you.
No problem. One of the first things I'd like to do is to ask both Kat and Christina, very quickly, in your opinion, what preparation do you always do before beginning the actual production? Christine, let's start with you. Christina, let's start with you. Christina, you're on mute.
My audio, here we go.
Yeah.
Slow at this, am I? Preparation, there's not one thing, unfortunately. Let's take the project I'm currently on that might help me formulate what is important. The first thing I do is read the script. Pretty much the script is the blueprint for everything we might do and might prep for.
I might add that some things producers don't often note is that if they are filming on set, whether it's an interior of a real home or on a studio set that has been furnished for the film, all the things that are seen in a certain shot, like paintings on a wall, for example, have to be cleared. They have to be, if they're protected by copyright, there's a question often of whether you can actually use that material, like a painting on a wall, in your shot without the permission of whoever owns the copyright, the artist or someone else, to that painting. So chain of title not only involves copyright in the script and other major materials that you automatically think of, it could also be, do you have the rights to show what you are showing? That might be a mural on a city wall that you're filming in front of. So there are lots of things that go into a chain of title that a distributor that you eventually find for your project is going to want to make sure you have all the rights necessary, as Kat calls it, the chain of title. Okay, very good.
That's what Christina would hire me or Catley Productions to do the script clearances and all the clearances and licensing. You go through page by page and immediately look and see what kind of problems. But what, Christina, were you?
Christina, you're waving your arms.
I'm waving my arms because one thing is very important, and in the chain of title, as regards to the screenplay aspect of it, that I wanted to add is that sometimes it's very simple. We're dealing with a writer-director making his or her film, and it's a pretty straightforward process. However, before you are able to do anything, and actually SAG can back me up on it, you are required to register the screenplay with the Library of Congress. And the unions, actually not the unions, the guilds will require to see proof of that. So the ownership of the script is not just sending yourself the script or whatever some independent filmmakers think that it is, or it's actually registering the screenplay with the Library of Congress and making sure that the producing entity that owns the rights and that will become signatory of SAG or DGA or both, can prove, can show proof of ownership.
Exactly, and you're talking specifically about the Copyright Office in the Library of Congress.
That's correct.
That's where the registration actually comes from. And you have to give yourself time on that, because sometimes it could take up to 6 months to actually get the physical piece of paper that says your copyright is officially registered. So you have to think ahead on these things. Kwame, let me go to you. You're with the Chicago Film Office. What the hell is the Chicago Film Office?
There's a lot of people just sit around in an office all day and watch movies. No, so what we do is a lot of things. What we're primarily tasked with is permitting film production, and that's from every scale, from student films to a major motion picture like a Batman or something like that. So we provide a liaison between film production and city services like police, fire, streets and sand. We allow you to get control of the streets and the sidewalks to execute your shots. We work with different municipal entities, the spaces that we control, as well as the city partners like the Park District and Navy Pier and all of the other entities that we work with. We're also tasked with economic development for a film production sector in the city. So that means reaching out to studios and studio developers and to build infrastructure and to draw additional production to the city. We also have a cultural aspect. We do a lot of, in the better times, we did a lot of screenings and we displayed a lot of films here at the Cultural Center. Well, not here, but at the Cultural Center.
Kwame, let me ask you this. If I am, you talked about one of the major things that the Film Office does among many, many things is permitting. What if I am an independent producer and I'm shooting a movie in my little apartment, it's just a couple of people that I bring into my apartment to shoot an independent film. Do I still need to get a permit?
No, I will say this. When you need a permit is when you start to affect the public and the world around you. So when you need to control a sidewalk, when you need the curb lane of a street, when you need to control a street, that's when you need a permit. As long as you're not disrupting pedestrian or vehicular traffic or, causing some type of hazard or infringing on public property. If you're on private property, then you do not need a film permit.
And what about the procedure? What does it take to get the permits needed?
Well, first of all, I would suggest going to our website. We lay out the procedure pretty well, and it's very instructive. We have a lot of useful information there. So, but basically what you want to do is 72 hours before you want to film, you want to go to the website, you want to enter into our permit system with the Chicago Department of Transportation, the streets or the sidewalks that you want to permit. You want to make sure you have your insurance and all your documentation that you need, because you will have to have insurance if you want a permit from the city of Chicago. And if you need police or fire support, you want to let us know those things so that we can link you up with that. If you need support from electrical operations or some other city agencies, you let us know and we'll provide those links for you.
Do you often send a representative from your office to check on a movie that's being shot, say, on a city street or on a sidewalk, to make sure all these things have been done?
Yeah, on larger scale projects, we will go to sites and make sure, say on a project is the scale of like Batman, the shot over the last couple of weekends, where we had massive street closures. That's something that we definitely pay close attention to. But we have a code of conduct and ethics that we require all film productions to sign off on. And we expect them to follow that for the most part. And, the public is really good at keeping them honest about it.
In terms of a producer being able to do a realistic budget for their production, can they get the information from your office about how much it will cost, not only for the actual permit, but for all the other things you're talking about, fire, sanitation, et cetera?
Yes, all that information is listed on our website. The rates and the scales for city services, they're all provided there. We can definitely provide that information for you.
Very good. Are there any particular rules or regulations involved in permitting that you want to make sure people understand that sometimes or quite frequently people don't do, they overlook them, they're not aware of them? Anything that you feel that you've come across so many times that it's important for people to know right up front?
Well, I would say definitely I would stress the importance of thorough scouting and to make sure that your pre-production is sound and your logistics and what you're asking for is actually what you need, and you don't need more or less than what you're asking for. I think a really good thorough scout will provide that information. The worst thing is to get there on the day and realize that you need more than you asked for, and now you have to try to scramble to get it. And we're just not able to turn around that type of permitting, that quickly. So I implore you to definitely make sure that you have all your ducks lined up. And the notification of the public, I think, is something that a lot of people take for granted, or they get kind of sideswiped with it. But we require that the area that you're filming in is notified at least 48 to 72 hours before filming. And you do that via leaflet. I suggest door-to-door leafleting, talking to all the businesses, and really interacting with the people that you're going to be affecting in the area. It's a requirement, but I think it serves your purposes as well, because it lets you know ahead of time any type of potential issues that can occur on your shoot day.
Okay. And you were talking about insurance requirements. What type of insurance does any independent producer, what must they have in order to obtain the permits necessary?
We require $1 million policy, naming the city as the additional insured.
A general liability policy?
Yes.
Okay. Anything else?
I believe that we also require workman's compensation as well.
Okay. Okay. And when you say additional insured, what do you mean?
We require a cert from your insurance company naming the city of Chicago as an additional insured on a certificate of insurance.
Okay, which means they're covered. The city is covered.
The city is covered. Yes.
Nothing goes wrong. Okay.
For any mayhem you may cause in our fair city,
okay,
you'll be on the hook for it.
What other general resources besides what's on your website does the film office make available to film producers?
Well, I have to compliment the team that we have. It's a small team, but there's a wealth of knowledge in that team. So I would take stock in that. There's a lot of experience. People have been working in the office for quite some time, and they have a lot of connections and things as far as getting stuff done in the city, as well as it's just experience in general about what streets work best for what types of scenes, or what's been a problem in the past, as far as getting permission for, or things like that. So that's just the kind of the wealth of knowledge. And I believe the film office provides very concierge service to filmmakers of all grades, from student films to large productions. We'll sit down with you and help you work out your logistical issues. We'll help you get the city services that you need. And in general, we'll provide you with the pathway that you need to navigate the city services. And then also, just real quick, we're also working with independent filmmakers to provide professional development, because we believe that creating a creative infrastructure here is the way to go forward. So that's something that we do as a film office as well.
Terrific. Christina, let me ask you a question. If you were in a room full of beginners, people who are going into their first extremely major for them independent film production, what would you tell them to avoid? What have you done in your early career that you wish you had done differently?
Well, actually, that was one of the things I wanted Kwame to address. It seems like 90% of my short films or small independent films have scenes in the train, in the CTA. And Kwame, why don't you talk a little bit about this? Because I know a lot of young filmmakers and older filmmakers get chased out of the train, and I think it's an important aspect, because we live in a city with a very charismatic and trained L system, and everybody wants to have that scene in the L, on the platform, in the train.
Good question.
So the CTA is very easy to work with filming if you have the budget to work with them. I mean, that's what it basically comes down to, and you will need a budget to work with them because, in all honesty, it's a city service that you can't just impact, right? So you can't just come on a working train with a camera and start filming the passengers. You can't disrupt the platform. So they have to make special arrangements for you in order to work on the system. And unfortunately, that requires some expense on their part. So I would think about that going forward in your creative process, how much of the L system you want to include in there, because it can be pricey. Now, they are willing to work with you, but you definitely, the last thing I would suggest is trying to steal a CTA train.
Kwame, let me ask you this. I know that drone shots have become very common nowadays, but is that something your office has anything to do with it, or is that strictly a Federal Aviation Administration problem?
Well, we act as a liaison between the drone operator and the FAA. We allow them to file their flight plan, and we also reference that with OEMC and the police department to make sure that everyone is coordinated and informed about what's going on. So we act as a go-between between filmmakers and most governmental agencies. If we can't handle what you're looking for, then we'll usually connect you with the governmental agency that you need in order to get it done.
Christina, let me ask you another question. On a set, in your opinion, who are the most important people, besides yourself, of course?
I was going to say myself, come on.
Besides you and the director and the actors and all the camera people and the lighting people and the sound people, besides all the standard production folks, who is the most important beyond that group? Someone else that you think is vital to any production set?
I think you covered them all, didn't you? Production designer, maybe you did?
How about the scouts that Kwame was talking about?
Sure. The locations department is actually crucial in getting you to that set, to that location. And especially in the case of independent filmmakers and low budget filmmakers, finding the right location at the right price and somewhat already dressed and ready to go is kind of the ideal situation. Most low budget films do not have the how would I say, the financial ability to transform and recreate spaces. So a lot of times you have to rely on a good team, or at least a few people that will find the right locations for your characters, for your show. It's indispensable. A lot of, I've dealt with actually on lower budget films that I mentored. A lot of times they say, oh, we just need one person in locations. And they do not realize the impact of that department across the board, and how it assists not only finding that location, but making sure the permits are done correctly, the insurances are issued appropriately, and especially when you're dealing with low budget productions, is getting the right location for the right price.
Okay.
It can be, in the right neighborhood or whatever. And also those people interact, intimately with the Chicago Film Office or other entities if they are right outside the city zone, and make it happen for you. A lot of times we don't give them enough credit for what they make happen.
Sure.
for a
Let
production.
me ask Kat a question real quick. Kat, something similar that I asked Christine a minute ago. If you could go back to the beginning of your career in film, what would you do differently?
Differently, I would insist on more pre-production time.
And how much
but-
I know it depends on the kind of film you're doing, but in general, if you can answer the question, how much pre-production time is necessary?
I've worked on indies, I've worked on, commercial films, Broadway productions, documentaries, television, and Christina is really good about this, so she'll agree with me. The more pre-production time you have, the better your production and the better your monies are going to go. Everything matters about your pre-production. Pre-production is so important. That is when all the locations are being determined. That's when you have to give the CTA. They're wonderful to work with if you give them enough time and you can negotiate things. So I don't like to work on anything that has less than a 3-month pre-production, but I would prefer even more than that. And nothing says that the whole group has to be working. If you have a lead producer like a Christina and get a business producer or a lawyer to help you with that kind of stuff, just start working on that so that while she's putting together the crews and all the important creative things, the other person like Catley Productions can be working on permits or with their things. Like for my company, we use almost exclusively interns out of like Flashpoint Academy, well, Tribeca now, or Columbia law interns and all. So we have a lot of people that we can use and be less expensive in that way because they're actually getting school credit than having to be paid. But and if they're doing it during that whole semester, if I have a whole semester where I can do teaching as well as using them, it really helps your production a lot.
Kat, since we're talking about a forum today that's sponsored by, among others, Lawyers for the Creative Arts, which, as Jan may have mentioned, is basically an army of volunteer lawyers in and around Chicago that help out the creative community. How important is the legal stuff in either pre-production or post-production or whatever?
I started working in film with Christina before I became a lawyer. And so I did not go to law school till I was in my late 40s. And that's why you were my professor. So one of my professors, but a very good professor. So you don't need to learn the law, but I'll tell you what, knowing the law now has, first of all, helped my career tremendously. And it kind of pushes you faster up the ladder because you can come in with the ability of having the JD and being able to negotiate the contracts and bring everything to the end. So that helps with commercial productions especially. But the legal aspect is very important. It depends on how much your lead producer or actually understands the law. I'm lucky because I mostly tag with Christina Baratzis or Kartemquin Films on the documentary side, and both of them are very, very, Gordon Quinn, both of them have a major handle on the law. Christina can do anything she wants, by herself. But when you work with indie films where it's maybe their first film or something like that, if they don't have their legal aspects figured out, Chris will tell you for this, your E&O is going to be a mess. Chris will get into that with insurance. Like Kwami's saying, you're going to get in trouble for half the time, you're going to have someone like me come through and say, looking at your daily saying, you can't have this in the back. We got to get this clear. And you'll have to do reshoots and recasting if you haven't, registered your script correctly, like Christina said. So it's very, very important. With LCA, the Lawyers of Creative Arts, you can actually apply. I mean, we all have, I hope most lawyers do it. I mean, we all in the creative arts have worked with LCA to do pro bono work for anybody who qualifies. And, I actually prefer that to anything that's working with them because they're so appreciative.
One of the things that I have found when I was practicing, I'm retired now, was that sometimes an independent producer, a new independent producer, would come to me, and I would talk to them about all these different things they need to do, contracts for actors, for the crew, blah, 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 blah. And they would say, oh, it's just a small production. I'm just doing it with a bunch of friends. Who cares?
No.
And that is where the trouble starts.
Right.
Because you're in business with these people. I don't care how friendly you are with them. You are in business, and treat it as such, so that there's no question about what's required of them or you. And when people see a deal on paper, it may be quite different from what they were thinking they were going to do. And so just the contract stuff, whether it's in pre-production, whether it's production, whatever it may be, the contracts or other legal documentation is extremely important. And the fact that you're all friends makes absolutely no difference whatsoever.
No, and also working with the unions, you know, Charles, we'll talk about this. Though there isn't wiggle room, there's sanctions if you don't do it properly. I mean, he may be able to tell us that there's some clemency, or but if you just disregard the union, that makes my head explode. So, you know, that just wouldn't. I try not to work with producers like that, but brand new producers, like you said, they have no idea. They just think they can just take a camera and go, and it's not that way.
And Charles, let me get to you now. What is the most infuriating thing that SAG-AFTRA encounters? That's the most common infuriating thing with independent producers in Chicago?
You know, I would say, just from an actor standpoint,
yes,
and I think that it comes from SAG-AFTRA too, is the misconception of what it means to work with SAG-AFTRA. It's just misinformation upon misinformation. People thinking that the contracts are too long and too complicated. People thinking that it costs too much to use SAG-AFTRA actors. People thinking, you know, just a whole bunch of stuff that's just been passed down. And so it's just infuriating to say, you know, somebody approaches me and they're like, hey man, you know, you want to be in this film? I'm like, oh yeah, sure, great. Is it SAG-AFTRA? Oh no, it's not. I can't afford union actors. Oh, how much are you paying? This amount. And it's like, that's more than the SAG-AFTRA rate for this film. So if you would have just done the research, or at least just called the office, you could have figured out that it's not that, right? So I think that's the most infuriating thing, just misinformation, you know.
Sure.
Which is why I'm so glad you all are doing this series of panels. This is great.
I know as a union president, you want everybody to hire SAG-AFTRA actors, but SAG-AFTRA also has series of contracts that give some variance for producers to use both actors that are union and non-union. For example, various low-budget, ultra-low-budget contracts with SAG-AFTRA. Can you just, without going into too much detail, can you give us some ideas about what those contracts are all about?
Yeah. So, I mean, there's a couple of great contracts to use. Anything that's going to be on camera or recorded or on, you know, the web, there's going to be a contract for it. Starting out, you're going to start with the SPA agreement, which is the short project agreement. And that is anything that's going to be under, I don't want to misspeak, so I just want to make sure I got it. It is under $50,000. And then you have the ultra low budget agreement, which is up to a $300,000 budget, and then moderate low budget, which is $300,000 to $700,000, and then the low budget agreement, which is $700,000 to $2 million. And so those are just the, you know, if you fit that budget, then there's going to be a sliding scale for pay for actors, but pretty much the requirements or expectations remain the same for the contracts, just making sure that, you know, you're taking meal breaks at a certain time. If you go over a certain amount of hours, you go into overtime, and just making sure, especially right now inside of COVID, that everybody is adhering to the, you know, the COVID guidelines.
And Charles, when someone says that they are, or their company, if they have a production company, which is also something that should be recommended rather than trying to do a production just on your own, you should try to set up some kind of production company for sheltering assets of your own from potential problems that may arise that you don't foresee. But what does it mean to be a signatory to SAG-AFTRA?
Yeah, being a signatory is just going through the process of agreeing to adhere to the guidelines of the contracts. Actually, y'all, I have I'll drop it in the chat. There's a link. Hold on, I copied it from my phone. I'll drop it in just a second, but it's how you sign up to be a signatory for a lot of these lower budget films. And it's just right on SAG-AFTRA's website, and it's a couple of easy steps. It even has a signatory form at the end of it. So it's a super helpful resource.
Okay.
I'm dropping it now.
Does the union have any role during production?
Oh yeah. I mean, once, and that's what I love about being an actor. It's not like, okay, the contract is signed, good luck, right? The union comes out if there are issues on set. They'll come out, they'll do set visits. Even if there's not issues on set, they'll come out and do set visits and just make sure that the actors are always safe and taken care of, and that the production is going according to plan.
And you're going to be the first person I ask this of, but I'll get around to most everybody else on this same question eventually. In this age of COVID, as it's often called, what are the union concerns?
The union concerns, really, it's about productivity and about returning to work over safety. That's the hugest concern, right? Because unfortunately, the actors a lot of times are the last people to be hired. And, because of that, we're kind of like, well, the actors, they'll bounce back. Oh, if union doesn't do it, if we can't figure out union, some non-union actor is going to do it. And that's a huge concern, that if it's not in the budget, or if it is, people don't know what the SAG-AFTRA guidelines are for COVID, and then they say, oh, well, I'm just going to go non-union. That's a huge concern, because go union, please go union. But even if you don't go union, please adhere to the safe way forward documents. Please adhere to like PPE and making sure that everybody is covered and safe on set.
Christina.
Yes, I just wanted to add something, is even if you are not a union show, the city itself has requirements that are very similar, if not the same, as the unions have. Do you want to address that a little, Kwame? I mean, the city does have, and the state have requirements and very stringent guidelines in this day and age, where, we can infect one another. Kwame?
Yes.
Kwame, please.
Yes, I'm going to put in the chat now the link to our website that has links to all the COVID information and the information for the different. So basically, we have guidelines that we develop with the industry partners and the health department that have strict requirements as far as capacity inside of interior spaces, PPE, social distancing, and hygiene requirements. So all of those requirements need to be fulfilled in order to do any film production during this time. And that applies to all levels of film production, from student films to commercials to everyone. So my feeling is that if you can't adhere to these guidelines at this time, then you don't need to be doing production.
Kwame, does the city require that there be a separate person named as the COVID officer on set?
Those are a part of the industry guidelines that we are in alignment with. So as required by the white paper guidelines, that production would require to have a COVID officer.
Okay, and when, for example, if a lighting person, during production, a lighting person tests positive for COVID, does the city require that the production be shut down?
The city does not have that requirement that this production be shut down. The unions and the networks, they have their own procedures for these things. We are monitoring the situation with the cases that happen in crews, and if we decide that there's an outbreak or a sufficient amount of transmission in production, and then that's when the health department will step in.
Kat, what about your advice on this?
Since I'm doing more the business aspect of it, so what we've had to pull down, just to tighten up, is all the SEC requirements and everything for our investors, where the money's just sitting there, and how long are we allowed to hold on to these investments in escrow? So more the boring money aspect of it, the COVID, and how it's affecting, and also the increase in liability insurance. I don't know if Chris will talk about that, but we took out a couple umbrella policies on some shows that I've been working on, just to protect ourselves for things, because outside of the film thing, one of the things that's been happening in Broadway shows is that they've been going straight to Netflix now and doing the filming of it. So and those required really strict changes in the investment policies with the SEC, because we're mostly working with accredited investors, but in studios, but sometimes there'll be a few people, friends and family type, and that you need to be careful about with their monies in a high risk investment like that. And then especially switching it over then to being on Netflix, coming out before an actual opening of the show. So that's where I've seen issues with COVID, and hopefully Chris Johnson will talk about what's happening in the insurance world with that.
Charles, your advice on this situation that everyone in the business, whether it's television, film, theater, it doesn't matter. What is your advice?
Advice for particularly
how to handle the COVID situation on set.
Yeah, I mean, I would say just adhere to all the guidelines that's in place. Like it's not people aren't just making this stuff up. Like it's tested. It's been bounced around by all of the unions, all of the major producer parties from the legal and the cities and and Illinois or whatever local you're in or whatever state you're in. So just adhere to the guidelines. And also, if you don't feel comfortable, if you don't feel safe, from an actor standpoint, your career will be here when we hopefully get this all figured out. So don't rush, don't put yourself into a situation where your health is compromised or your safety is compromised or your integrity is going to be compromised.
Okay. Chris, we've been alluding to it. Let's get to it. Chris, tell me, apart from general liability policy that Kwame has talked about already, what other forms of insurance do you often recommend for film production?
Well, I've seen some questions in the Q&A too about workers' comp, so I'll jump right to workers' comp. And workers' comp covers people being paid to do work if they're injured or contract a work-related disease. And you'll notice I said people being paid to do work and not employees. And if people take any one thing away from this, from what I've said, the definition of employee for tax purposes and the definition of employee for workers' comp are not the same and are not intended to be the same. And in the film world, based on state regulations and case law, if you hire someone directly to work on a film, whether you call them an independent contractor or a freelancer or whatnot, they have to be covered by workers' compensation insurance. So I would say that is critical. So general liability, workers' comp. The next thing that typically comes up for people is rented equipment coverage. And of course, if you're renting gear from a rental house, they're going to require you to insure it. And you need a limit of insurance equal to the replacement value of what you're renting. So if the gear you're renting is worth $250,000, you need $250,000 of insurance coverage for rented equipment. Another thing that people overlook a lot is that there's insurance called general liability, which I use the memory device that general liability covers the general public. So you're talking about covering people not involved in the production if they get injured or their property is damaged. The most common claim there is a pedestrian walking down the street trips over a cable and gets hurt. That's a general liability claim. With most insurance companies, general liability does not cover damage to locations. And the insurance terminology for that is that the location, because you have permission to use it, is in your care, custody, and control. That's the insurance term. And so it's no longer covered with general liability, and you need to purchase a separate coverage called third-party property damage. And that most specifically covers damage to locations. And then there's a lot of coverages specifically designed for filmmakers, and those more specific types of coverage also come up more in the dealing with COVID issues. And just a couple of those I'll mention pretty quickly. One is cast coverage, and cast coverage is not what people typically think. It doesn't pay the cast members anything if they get sick. It pays the production company if cast members can't work due to illness or injury, to help cover the costs of rescheduling productions. For smaller productions, typically right now, they are excluding COVID from cast coverage. So if your cast member gets the flu, you're covered. If your cast member gets COVID, you're not covered. That's the reality of the world we're in right now. That will probably change over time, but for smaller productions, that's basically where you are. Another coverage is called civil authority coverage, and that is basically coverage for if non-military government entity shuts down the production. It can be the fire department, it can be the police department, it can be the health department. So there's a fire down the street from where you're shooting, the fire department blocks off the entire block to keep it safe, and you can't shoot for a day. It would cover the cost of reshooting. In the COVID world, you can't get civil authority coverage for a small production now until the insurance companies have more data on how often that's going to happen and how long shutdowns from health departments are going to be. They don't know how to price the coverage, and so they're not selling it right now. I will say the areas, as long as I'm talking about COVID, where there is coverage is both workers' comp and general liability. Workers' comp, in terms of what is covered, is actually defined by state regulation. So the insurance companies can't change it and exclude COVID. That would take state action to do that. So if someone working on your production contracts COVID on the production and they can prove that's where they got it, that is a covered workers' comp claim. Same way with general liability coverage. If people, let's suppose you're shooting in a building and suddenly there's an outbreak of COVID in that building, if they can prove your production brought COVID there, that you were responsible, that would be a covered general liability claim. Now, the question we don't know yet is what are the courts going to decide is enough evidence to prove where a person caught COVID or who exposed a group of people to COVID. That we probably don't have enough case law on yet to know. But so there is some coverage for COVID, but there's also other areas where there's specific exclusions for COVID.
Could you also talk about what I consider to be a very important type of insurance? And Christina and Kat have alluded to it, and that is what's known as errors and omissions insurance, or E&O. What does that kind of policy cover?
Yeah, so two basic things I'll say. So the one way to think about it is that everything I was talking about before is production insurance. It's insuring you during the production process, basically. Errors and omission insurance comes after, and it actually insures the content of the film. And it insures the content of the film from things like copyright claims. And when we were talking about chain of title, where it's interesting is when the ownership gets complicated. So the film is based on a play that was based on a book that was based on a poem, or three versions of this film have been done in the past, and you're using the original source material. Whose rights do you need in order to make the film? Those are the situations where it gets complicated, and that's where errors and omissions insurance comes in and protects you and says, okay, we will insure you that if someone makes a copyright claim against you saying you didn't have full rights to produce this film, we will pay your legal costs, we will pay settled claims up to the limit of the policy. There's also things like defamation of character, that if, say, it's a narrative film, but one of the characters in your narrative film closely relates to a real person, that real person might sue and say, you defamed my character. Everybody knows you were portraying me in that film. You can also be sued by a corporate brand saying you damaged our brand in the film. That would also be covered by E&O insurance. So that's the big difference, is that the production insurance covers you during the production process and is really focused on the physical kinds of things that can go wrong: injuries to people, damage to property, theft of equipment, those kinds of things. And errors and omission insurance covers the film itself, the content of the film, against financial losses that people could claim against you.
And I think that's very important to emphasize, because some people think that general liability insurance does cover copyright infringement, trademark infringement, right of publicity, defamation, privacy invasion. It does not.
Nope.
Simply
does not.
And so this errors and omissions, or E&O insurance, is vital to producers.
And Chris,
Absolutely.
Can you explain to them, to the people in the audience, that you do not have to give us E&O insurance if we have not done the due diligence before we come to you and before production? That's the problem. If you have
yes.
done
Thank
that,
you.
can't get it.
So yeah, sometimes I think people tend to think of insurance as like a utility, and they the power company has to give you power. Insurance companies are private for-profit companies. They do not have to sell you insurance. And if you don't have the information they need, or if you haven't done the things they need, they will not sell you insurance. Yeah, so if you haven't done the work to get the chain of title on your film, you won't get E&O insurance. If you haven't properly, and this comes up a lot on the documentary side more, if you're using lots of clips, photographs, news reels, all that type of thing, if you haven't properly cleared those, they're not required to sell you insurance. And if it's in the insurance world, we say whether you're a good risk or a bad risk. And if you're a bad risk, they will just decline to quote. And I think that's a big thing that people have to understand, is that insurance companies only make money when they sell you insurance, but they're not required to sell you insurance. And if they don't think they can make money on you, that you're a bad risk for them, you're a bad bet for them, they will say no. That's
insurance. If you can't get insurance, you cannot get a distributor.
Right. You won't get a distributor without insurance.
That you can show to your parents, and that's about it.
That's right.
Yeah.
One thing I should add is that emphasize what Chris was saying, especially for documentary filmmakers and narrative filmmakers, creative films, whatever you want to call them, scripted films. To try to say that I'm going to rely on the copyright defense of fair use to use this painting in my shot. For creative or distributors will not rely on fair use. I'm sorry, that's just not good enough. You have to get them cleared. But in documentaries, for example, fair use is a possibility, more so than it is in scripted work. And lawyers are often required to get the E&O policy Chris is talking about. A producer's lawyer will often have to create what's known as a fair use letter that is going to cover scene by scene, minute by minute, all the material from third parties that are put into this documentary film that may be copyrighted or subject to copyright. And the attorney has to show in that letter why each of those uses is a fair use under the Federal Copyright Act, in order to get, at least to begin the process of getting E&O insurance. Yes?
Yes. And I would say that E&O insurance and your attorney go hand in hand, and I almost say E&O insurance is in fact insuring your attorney's opinion. So the better attorney, more experienced attorney you work with, the easier it is to get E&O insurance, and even potentially the better quotes you'll get in terms of price on E&O insurance. So yeah, it's very important to have good legal advice if you want to get E&O insurance and if you want to distribute your film. Absolutely.
Charles, you had your hand up a minute ago. Did you have a question or a comment?
That was just the no.
Oh, you were just doing a little stretch. Okay, very good.
I was doing a little stretch.
Very good. Chris, one more question for you.
Sure.
Does the insurance company, whether it's on the general liability side, E&O side, do they ever have reps to come on set?
For big films, yes. For single-digit million films, almost never. unless something goes wrong, and then they may come after the fact to investigate. But we do, you know, me being the agent, we stay very engaged with the filmmaker during production because their needs might change during production. For example, a location falls through, they need to go to a different location that might have different insurance requirements, you know, and we need to amend it. Or, you know, they thought they were going to shoot everything in the city and they ended up doing a scene, you know, in the suburbs. And Chicago loves filmmakers, and Chicago offers, you know, more reasonable insurance requirements than actually most of the suburbs do. So you might need different insurance. So we stay engaged throughout the process to, you know, for any changes that occur during production, but typically not on set unless it's a much bigger budget film or something goes wrong that has to be investigated.
Okay, and again, let's go back to what you were saying about COVID insurance. Do you see that the cost of COVID insurance is discouraging film production?
I would say on small films, insurance costs haven't really had an impact. The cost of following the safety protocols is more of an issue than changes in insurance. Because on the small projects, if there's a big COVID risk, the insurance company is just going to refuse to insure it. On bigger budget projects, yes, it's impacting cost. One thing insurance companies hate is uncertainty, because everything they do is based on data. They have these giant tables of literally hundreds of years of data on claims. And so they can predict how likely you are to have a claim to know how much they have to charge you for insurance. Well, they don't have information on COVID. They don't know if you have, you know, a cast and crew of 100 people on location for 15 days. What's the probability that, you know, how many of those people will come down with COVID? They don't have that data. They don't have good data on if 20% of your crew comes down with COVID, how many of them, you know, have serious symptoms, how many of them actually die. And so without that information, they have a hard time pricing insurance. So with smaller productions, that's what I'm saying, they're just not offering, you know, civil authority coverage. They're restricting cast coverage. On big productions, then yes, they are offering these coverages and the cost has gone up. So.
Okay, Kwame, I'm going to jump back to you with a question. We've heard about the Chicago Film Office. Are there if, for example, someone wanted to shoot outside of Chicago, say in Arlington Heights or some other town, film permits are also required there. Is that not correct? Most cities will have a requirement of film permits, correct?
Yes, and first of all, why would you want to shoot anywhere but the city of Chicago? Let's start there. Second, no, there's a tapestry of requirements outside of the city of Chicago, and I would suggest working with the Illinois Film Office, Peter Hawley, to navigate some of those smaller municipalities. And you have to be very careful. These suburbs have different requirements in the city of Chicago. Some of them are very restrictive. I know that Hughes kind of burned up the North Shore. And I don't know if they're still sore about all the stuff that he did up there, but their requirements are
John Hughes, yes.
Hughes, God rest his soul. But you know, because of the film production he did in that area, they have a lot of restrictive policies in place there. And I could say, you know, some other municipalities like Evanston, Oak Park, although they might be right outside the city, their requirements for film production are entirely different than ours. So make sure you do your homework and make sure before you get heavily invested in a smaller town that you understand what their film production experience is like, first of all, and what their procedures are and what policies they have in place.
Very good, thank you. Kat, in your view, what role do the non-production people play? Lawyers, accountants, etc.
So for me, it's very important. I work hand in hand with the accounting team and all, just to make sure that the monies that are coming in, because it's very important that we are controlling the investments, especially if there are private investors, private equity in the production. There's a lot of SEC regulations that have to be followed. So I work with other lawyers and accountants all the time, and the union reps and all that. I know Christina would probably be able to tell you more about the actual like creative production, but I work with, like, for fair use, I try and do as much of the fair use on my own, but I always kind of jump to Michael Donaldson, the king, or Patricia at American University. Sometimes if you go to them, they like to just send off on their letterhead a letter to ABC and get us our footage for Muhammad Ali for a documentary with Kartemquin, much easier than you can do on your own. So it is something where you can contact like the LCA and find out if there's a specific lawyer that can help you, especially if they believe that what you're doing does need a Freedom of Information Act or a fair use requirement. So working with other lawyers, having good relationships with other lawyers, and having a good relationship with the SEC, and having a good relationship with accountants is important to me.
Charles, I'm jumping around now, but let me ask you this. In film production, a service is often used called a payroll service. What is a payroll service?
Payroll services are just the folks that, the money funnels through them. So, I mean, I know payroll services like Extreme Reach, Talent Partners, and they cut the checks.
And that's for, and generally they cut the checks, as you say, for anybody working on the production, whether they be actors, director, camera guys, etc. Yes?
I can't speak for the other sides of it, but I do know that they do cut the checks for SAG-AFTRA.
Right. Now, to be a payroll service that cuts checks for union members, they have to be the signatories, correct?
Yeah.
To the union, signatories to the union. And so is that a way for producers to avoid being a signatory?
I don't think so.
Yeah, if
No, because they still need to be signatories. Yeah, you still have to be a signatory to the contract.
That's correct. Yeah, that's correct. But to avoid all the payroll stuff, hire a signatory, union signatory payroll service, correct?
There you go.
Yeah.
Okay.
Added protection. It's always best to work with people that, to surround yourself with people that are experts in their field so that you are protected. And then Chris will give you a better rate on your insurance.
There you go. Exactly.
And then you'll get a better distribution deal because you have everything in line.
Exactly. Christina, what has been your most harrowing experience on production? The scariest thing? Can you think of anything besides the fear of the unknown?
Actually, I'm trying to think. I mean, it's always looking back, it's always, looks better than it was at the moment. When you actually are in the moment and you are faced with a challenge, being a last minute location drop, or your actor getting hurt on set, and then wondering how you can not lose any shooting days and move change your schedule at the last minute, whether obviously for some reason I cannot think of anything in particular, and I don't know why. Let me think about that one.
I thought you were going to say working in the sewage treatment plant that time.
That's right.
We had issues with stunts, Christina. Stunt days were horrible days. It was always nerve-wracking, don't you think?
For me, it is. I mean, I have to admit that there's one project where I don't believe the and I'm not done to name names, but the approval process and the selection of the stunt team wasn't made with my recommendations, and we found ourselves with people that I did not feel comfortable with, and that is nerve-wracking from the standpoint that you're trying to get the studio to understand your concern, at the same time trying to work with your team and not, it's just the whole diplomatics of it to try to make it as safe as possible. And then dealing with, if something happens, dealing with that big elephant in the room and pretty much saying, weren't we expecting this? And I'm big or small stunts and special effects need to be taken very seriously on big or small shows. SAG-AFTRA here in town has a wonderful team of stunt people that are always willing to work and help low budget films. And I would recommend that, regardless of your budget, please do hire professionals. Don't hire your friend to do that. Obviously, we'll have an impact on the insurance, and we'll have an impact on, obviously, the safety of everyone involved. Yes, and to tell you the truth, regardless of how good my stunt team might be, I'm always nervous for some reason. I don't know why. I'm worried for them. I'm worried for everything. But hiring the right people is the start to not have to be concerned. And really, we have wonderful people in Chicago, and people a lot of times do not realize how great of a team we have. And right now there's more and more of the younger crop that has been trained, and they really look for the opportunities with smaller shows and smaller stunts to build their resumes, and a lot of times under the watchful eye of their mentor, et cetera, et cetera. So I would say effects and stunts are definitely an area that independent filmmakers need to think about very cautiously. We were talking about trains earlier. Don't steal a train scene. Being on a train or attempting to do anything and to steal a scene is a danger, not only to yourself, but to the passengers and to anyone involved. So I would say for me, it's, most of my horror stories and hopefully everything has always turned out, well, or somewhat well, have been relating to safety. And I would recommend to any independent filmmaker to not skimp on that. And the rate of the stunt coordinator on an ultra low budget or a short film is affordable to anyone, and you can have the peace of mind of having somebody watching and making sure you're not doing anything stupid.
Thank you. Before time runs out, I want to make sure Jan, I believe, or Chris Johnson at LCA have been curating any audience questions we may have. Jan, is there anything that we need to address?
Well, it's interesting because a lot of these questions have come up and then they've been answered. So I think you guys have done a fantastic job of anticipating the questions. I'll just throw in a few that seem to be suggested, and maybe one or two of my own. First of all, I want to say thanks to Jerry for his skilled use of leading questions, where you, especially with Chris Johnson, I thought the leading questions were tremendous.
But it was the cooperation of the panel that made all of this possible.
There we go. But one question I had on insurance is if you get general liability insurance and it covers this particular shoot, for example, or production, the entire period, Can the insurance company cancel you in the middle of it if they decide that, gee, there's something unsafe happening, or let's say COVID, but because that's always on everybody's mind, but it could be any unsafe condition. Do they have the right to come in there and say, you have not lived up to a standard of care that we expected from our insured, and therefore we're pulling the plug? How does that work?
Yes, they can do that. In practice, on smaller productions, that's limited because they're just not on site to see if something's happening. But let's suppose you have, an accident that's related to a stunt that you hadn't previously reported to the insurance company. They're going to pull the insurance on the rest of your production. So that can definitely happen. And certainly on a very big production, there's going to be representatives of the insurance company there all the time. But for smaller productions, they're not there. They have the right to pull the coverage, and they will, like I say, if a claim comes in that's related somehow to either something you didn't inform them of, or you didn't follow safety procedures that you said you were going to follow. But I would say it's also bigger than just that production, because you can become what we in the insurance world call an uninsurable risk. That if you've shown in the past that you don't want to follow safety procedures, or you don't properly inform the insurance company of what you're doing, it's a small world that insures film productions, and you will just develop a reputation around the limited number of insurance companies that sell this, and they just will not sell you insurance because they think you're too risky, you're an uninsurable risk. And so you're thinking about protecting your whole career, not just, of course you need to protect this specific production, but you also need to protect your whole career, by doing things properly so that you can get insurance for the next project as well.
And is it a common question on an insurance application to ask whether you have ever been denied coverage in the past?
Yes, every insurance application will ask you if you've been denied, if your coverage has been denied, canceled, or non-renewed in the past. Every insurance application will ask you, what claims have you had in the past? And and a lot of times for a producer, they will ask, what are the last 5 films you worked on? Were there any claims? Depending on the size budget, it may be, were there any claims over $10,000 on these past 5 films? So yes, your insurance history follows you throughout your career.
Right.
And so if you become a bad insurance risk, that will create problems for you in the future, both either definitely higher costs and potentially an inability to get insurance at all.
Yeah, being denied coverage is a stain on your record that it makes insurance very difficult to obtain in the future.
Jan,
good reason.
Could I jump in here for just a minute?
Sure.
One thing I wanted to ask, just very quickly, Kwame, I want to ask this of you. And I know that you're with the City Film Office, and that optimism is something perhaps that you want to project here. But what do you see in the current situation that we're in about the future of film production in the city?
I think it looks great. I mean, we're actually in active talks to bring more film production here to the city of Chicago with a lot of studios and networks. We're trying to develop more infrastructure here, more studio space. We are building forward, and we feel that film production can be an important part of the economic recovery process for COVID. So we've been working really hard to try to reach out to these studios and networks and show them all the advantages that make us very competitive with a city like Atlanta or New Orleans. And we feel like we could surpass them if we can build up our infrastructure and develop our workforce.
Jan, go back to you.
I'm happy you asked that question, because love Kwame's answer. My experience with the Chicago Film Office has just been fantastic, with Tavares, who's on the chat here, and John Hundreiser, and of course Kwame. So it's an incredibly expert team doing a lot to improve the opportunities for filmmakers in Chicago. So I just wanted to thank them as well. This one question, I'm always coming back to lawyers. So we talked about a COVID officer. I think if someone can explain, then we have a question in here as to what a COVID officer is. And another question, a related question is, how important is it to have a lawyer on call during the production of a film? Maybe they don't have to be there, but physically on set, but how important is it to have access to an attorney who can answer legal questions that arise during a production? I'll put that out to anybody.
I can answer the compliance officer if you'd like me to.
Sure.
I have one right now. Actually, this person started at the same time I did, just to show the importance of the role of that individual. And that person was actually assigned by the studio. I'm currently doing a show for Disney, and the first person that was shipped out was a COVID compliance officer, and that person pretty much coordinates the entire effort. With the assistance of the producers and production, we'll hire their team, we'll set up the protocols, we'll make sure they're enforced, we'll make sure that the PPE is ordered, we'll make sure that nobody goes over capacity. Obviously through the staff that they hire. Yesterday, as a matter of fact, I received a note from my compliance officer to say, pretty much put a list together of how many people she needed for our production, and I almost fell off my chair. But it all made sense, and to make sure that there's people with locations, as they're prepping a location and they strike it, people in the office, people on set, people in all the different pods, as we call them, all the different areas of production. And it is an incredible effort, actually, to make sure, and obviously scheduling the testing. How did I forget that? The first thing she did was to schedule testing, for myself and for folks that might be coming from out of town. So we test before they leave Los Angeles or New York or wherever, and they test again when they arrive in Chicago, and then they have to wait for their results before they can, be exposed to the rest of the folks. And when I say exposed, is not exposed, physically, is having your mask and your shield and your 6 foot distance, et cetera, or your plexiglass or whatever that might be. So it's an incredibly important position that actually has the expertise, that has the knowledge, that has the resources, and then with the assistance of productions, make sure it happens. You have on set, you have a second AD, for instance, that is the COVID AD. Throughout all the different pods, you have COVID PAs, and make sure that everybody has what they need at any time. Sanitation, water, cleaning supply, whatever that might be, or clean up after people. And as I said, folks on location, on stage, constructing, you name it. Everywhere there is a crew member, there is an officer or a delegated individual, being a PA, to make sure things are done properly and they have the right tools to get the job properly. So that's what that person does, and it's a lot of work, and we have to do a lot of lists for them. So right now I'm doing a lot of COVID thing instead of worrying about the production, which is a little unsettling to a certain extent.
Sure.
You answered, Jan wanted to know about if there was, if you needed to have a lawyer all the time, at beck and call. And the question, I would think, Christina, you probably will agree with me that the most important is during pre-production. If you have a lawyer during pre-production, or someone that you can talk to, to make sure that you're doing everything right that way, then during production, it should be less necessary to have someone continually. and then you may need them again in the post-production and distribution stage of your show. But pre-production is pretty much, you'll need some type of a legal help.
Kat, could I ask you a question? You mentioned this in an answer earlier today, but just briefly because of our time, Illinois is one of many states that offers what's known as a tax credit for film producers and television producers. Some states go even into the digital video game area, but Illinois certainly has a film tax credit available. What is that?
The tax credit is actually something that'll be when you were asking what's one of the first things that you would do. Your business producer should also be looking, once they know that they have the rights to everything, start looking into one of your investment aspects would be your tax incentive. And that you work with the Illinois Film Office, and that's very important because you have to apply for your tax incentive before you begin production if you're a documentary. And then for feature films and all, I think it's been 5 days of shooting. So it's best to just get it done ahead of time. And
Kat, let me interrupt you. I'm sorry. What is a tax credit?
A tax credit is, for the state of Illinois, is upwards of what, 30% back on a cap of, so anything that you spend in the state of Illinois as far as food and lodging and salaries for people that are actually Illinois residents, and even it can even go up if they're from an served area. Like I know if you're hiring people from outside of, like in Rockford or places where it's harder for them to work. So you get an even better tax incentive. So what happens is at the end of the production, you usually have someone in charge. Catley Productions, my company, actually does it for Cartemquin sometimes. And so we will go through all their receipts and figure out all their salaries, everything pre-production. And then while the receipts are coming in, we make sure they qualify for the tax incentive. Then you have up to 2 years to submit it to the Illinois Film Office. And then they will help you, usually you'd want to use an accountant or a company like ours that knows how to do tax incentives. And then they sell those on the market. Somebody will sell it, maybe say, I've seen it come as far as 94 cents on the dollar. And so, like for, I won't say what films I've worked on, but documentary films that I've worked on, we have received over $250,000 back from the Illinois Film, through the tax credit, which is a wonderful incentive for private equity. So what I tend to do in productions is offer that as an incentive to the private equity investors, saying that our tax incentive, which you can control if you keep your paperwork properly and you're very like, so they know that at least they would be getting back 30% on their investment, right away. I mean, not 30% on their investment, 30% of their investment.
Of their investment, yes, exactly.
To recoup in a film or documentary, especially theater, especially, it's very difficult. And so it's hard to attract investors that way. But also, even for your own sake, I tell productions not to use that as their contingency, but it's always nice to know that there might be some more monies coming down the road through the tax incentive. And it's really well documented at the Illinois Film Office. And as I tell my students, if you do it with plenty of time and you go in and ask for help with the Illinois Film Office, the people in charge of the tax incentive want to help you because it only makes their job easier if they train you of how to do it.
Exactly.
And if you use one of their approved accountants who are willing to work with you on your budgets.
Exactly.
But I'm so amazed because Illinois is one of the few states. I do this crowdfunding thing seminar throughout the nation and actually internationally too, because, tax incentives, as we all know it, is runaway productions with Canada, where Canada was giving monies back and everybody went and filmed in Canada. But Illinois is one of the best for tax incentives. It goes till 2026. Correct me if I'm wrong, Christina, you really have your handle on it. That's correct? Okay, good, Connie. But they also include Broadway, they include documentaries, some commercials. There are limits of how much it has to be, or, 50,000 or whatever, is you have to spend in the state. But it's supposed to be, and hopefully is, a win-win situation. I mean, there are other states that might give you a little better. And so when producers are looking to figure out where they're going to do production or even post-production, they'll consider the state. I do know that for Broadway, we use the state of Illinois a lot for our tryouts because they have the tax incentives. So Kinky Boots, Prada will try out first before we take it to Broadway here in Chicago, so we can get that monies back. For documentaries, for Cartemquin Films uses it, but I'm so surprised how many documentarians in Illinois do not go for the tax incentive.
Yeah, I understand. Jan, did you want to say something here?
Well, so I think we need to wrap it up. We're at a little bit beyond the hour and a half point. I want to thank all of our incredible panelists and Jerry Glover for moderating a great show. We were thinking, before everybody participants leave, we decided to try something new on this very last program, and that is to ask our panelists, and I would also extend that to our audience, what is your favorite film? So I'll start, but then I'm going to pass it around the room and just tell me, what is your favorite film? My favorite film is North by Northwest. Kwame, what's your favorite film? Unmute yourself.
I can't answer that.
Oh, no. Come on. I guess that's right. All right, I'll give you a pass.
I'll give you a hint. This is kind of, that's...
I think we can give you a pass on that now that I think about it. Jerry, what about you?
I thought about this because I knew you were going to ask, and it really depends on the era that you're talking about. I mean, but there's the early.
I know this is a hard question, but we just want a single answer. Go ahead.
All right. I hated it the first time I saw it, but then after seeing it several other times, I really liked La La Land.
All right.
Okay.
I'm going to pick Crip Camp that was opened at Sundance this year. It's a documentary I think everyone should see, and it's one of Michelle and Barack Obama's picks, and will hopefully win or at least be nominated for an Oscar.
Fantastic. Christina.
You did warn me to think about it, and I'm blowing you off. Why don't you go with the rest?
What won't be the first time?
Johnson.
Charles, how about you?
Johnson is dead. Give a plug for Johnson is dead.
Look, if I was doing a shameless plug, insert shameless plug, I would say my favorite film is a film that I produced, a short film that's going to be opening at Black Harvest tomorrow, Long Ride Home. But if I wasn't shaming, plugging my own film, I would probably say not a film, but a TV production. I'm absolutely in love right now with Lovecraft Country. I just think it's just absolutely fantastic.
What is it again? Say that again.
Lovecraft Country.
Isn't that one of yours, Christina?
Yeah, I did the pilot.
Yeah, it's on HBO.
Fantastic.
It's amazing.
How fancy.
Chris Johnson.
Mysterious Skin by Greg Araki. He's one of my favorite filmmakers.
Good one.
How about the other Chris Johnson, if you're still there? He's having some technical problems, so we'll give him a bye.
I think technically I'm the other Chris Johnson, and he's Chris Johnson. So.
Okay.
I think I got everybody. I'm writing these down because I'm going to watch them, the ones I haven't already seen. But someone said that North by Northwest is showing at the Music Box. So
Nice.
Anyway, well, listen, I just want to thank everybody for an incredibly engaging and interesting discussion, and Jerry for leading it. And again, for the Film Office for partnering with us on this. It's now our last program in this series. We'll hopefully do others with them, but I think this has been a good opportunity for Lawyers for the Creative Arts to partner with the city on something that's of front and center interest for a lot of people. So, Kwame, do you have any closing thoughts on that?
Just thank you. This has been a great experience. This has been providing some wonderful professional development programming for independent filmmakers here in the city of Chicago. We look forward to continuing this relationship and continuing that educational process for people. And thank you again for being a wonderful partner and making this happen for us.
All right. Well, we've got a lot to watch on the news, so have a great rest of your day, everyone, and stay safe out there.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks, Jan.
Thanks.
Thanks, Jerry.